if you could please put it into the silent mode. And if you would like to speak on a project on or off the agenda, you could fill out the slip and bring it back to this beautiful young lady on my left, and we can get you on the agenda. With that, we'll ask Chris to do our pledge.
Let's do it. Please stand, face our flag, place your right hand over your heart, and follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Okay, how about let's move to approve the minutes from our last meeting, the May 19th meeting.
I second to approve the minutes of May 19th as presented.
Want to do the roll call? Yeah, we should do roll call. Okay, let's have the roll call first. Chris, could you?
Commissioner Wolf,
I abstain.
Commissioner Rexstad,
Here.
Commissioner Hicks,
Here.
Commissioner Brzee,
Here.
Commissioner Beck,
Here.
Vice Chair Markarian,
Here.
Chair Algauer.
Here.
Well, here.
I'm not abstaining.
For being here.
He's abstaining from being.
I'm abstaining
That's
for
fine.
being here. I'm not here.
He's been out in the sun all day, so we got to give it to him, okay? So we got public consent that's approved.
I
Lloyd.
moved.
Has there been a vote taken on the minutes, or?
Yeah, we did.
No, I abstain. I wasn't here.
Oh, we
for
didn't
the,
take a vote on, okay.
Motion and a
Two of us weren't here.
Everybody's having a bad night.
Everyone's been in the sun today.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
hot, that's,
Okay, do we have a motion on the minutes? We have a motion. Do we have a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? None. Motion carries.
there are two abstentions.
Two abstentions.
Got the two, yeah. They're not here that often, so. Well, I guess we'll just move to the first item on the agenda, and that would be an oak tree permit for the removal of 8 live oak trees.
Just as a point of order for the agenda, there were no public comments for items not on the agenda as well. We skipped over that.
Okay.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman Algauer. So this is item number 2, as you said, for an oak tree permit for the removal of 8 coast live oak trees located at 37358 Limekiln Drive. The site is located within rural living zoning, which includes a minimum 1-acre lot size, and is also within the custom home overlay. So a single-family residence is permitted by right in RL1, but the home that's proposed to be constructed will need to meet the custom home overlay standards, which includes 2,000 square feet of habitable living space as well as a 600 square foot garage. So the applicant proposes to build a 2,829 square foot single-family residence and has submitted plans to Building and Safety, also with a request to remove 8 oak trees located on the property to allow adequate space for the building pad for his single-family residence. Pursuant to Section 89.0515 of the Municipal Code, the applicant must have an oak tree permit issued prior to building permits being able to be pulled for that single-family residence. Also, after resolution number 96-03 was adopted for oak tree conservation, requests for removal of 4 more oak trees were to be reviewed by Planning Commission and recommended to City Council for final approval. So here's a photo of the existing site. It's includes quite a large oak forest on the property. So in order to accommodate space for the single-family residence that needs to meet custom home overlay design standards, some oak trees were essentially going to be required to be removed to leave that space. 6 trees that are proposed to be removed are located within the footprint of the single-family home, while 2 trees will encroach into the protected zone and also need to be removed. 17 additional trees are located where electric and gas trenching was initially proposed, but through the building plan check process, the applicant opted to redesign his site, including the pad of the home as well as necessary utilities. So there will no longer be electric utility services needed to be provided via the street and impacting the trees from trenching, because he's opted to go completely solar and install a backup generator on his property. And additionally, the city's contract landscape architect recommends the removal of an additional 12 dead trees and 11 structurally compromised trees in order to prolong the health of this oak tree forest on site, because the compromised and dead trees are providing sanctuary and habitat for vectors and pests to reside. And so this could also kind of increase the health of the surrounding communities and the existing forest. So here's a photograph of the site survey that was prepared. Blue markers on this survey indicate trees located within the building pad. There's 2 trees that are encroaching into that building pad that will also need to be removed. And then pink and red trees indicated on this site plan are the trees recommended for removal to support the overall health of the forest. This is a rendering of his proposed home that was submitted to the Building and Safety Department and meets custom home overlay district standards with some unique architectural features and stone veneer proposed along the base of the structure. So per the resolution, each healthy tree removed is subject to a 3-to-1 replacement ratio, and structurally compromised and unhealthy trees are subject to a 1-to-1 replacement ratio. Tree 94 on the site survey was the only identifiable healthy tree, and then the other 7 are compromised. So 10 new oak trees are recommended to be planted on site or elsewhere in the city as replacements for those that are removed to support the construction of the single-family residence. Here's some photos from the site. And it's our recommendation that the Planning Commission recommend approval of this oak tree permit 20-085 for the complete removal of 8 trees, subject to the replacement ratios that I described, as well as recommend the removal of the additional 23 trees that are structurally compromised and or dead in order to support the overall health of the oak tree forest at the site.
Okay, anyone have any questions for staff at this time?
Yeah, so it's 8 plus 23?
So the applicant is asking for 8 to build the single-family residence, but the landscape architect has also recommended that 23 additional trees are removed in order to support the health of the overall oak tree forest. And so the applicant wouldn't be subject to replacing those trees that we're kind of recommending also be taken out.
Yeah.
So then we would make a motion to remove the 8 plus the 23.
Yeah, essentially all of them
So 30
together.
31 out of 96 total trees on this lot, correct?
Yes.
1/3.
Who's the landscape architect is this
Steve
the city's?
Franken is the contract landscape architect for the city, and he's visited the site a few times and is the one that kind of marked up that site survey per his findings.
And the replacement 10 trees are going to be planted where?
So through the approval process, the applicant can opt to maybe plant them on their current site or provide funds to the city to locate them within a park or somewhere on city facilities.
Now, there's a size requirement for the replacement trees?
Yeah, there is a size requirement indicated. I can go back and review those if you'd like. It's for the one healthy tree would be 2 24-inch box and then 1 36-inch. And then the unhealthy tree is 1 15-gallon oak tree.
Okay,
Which one is the healthy tree? Is that within the building pad?
Healthy
we know?
tree is number, I'd have to pull the plans because I can't really read the numbers on that. Give me one sec.
Well, two of the trees are being removed because of gas meters or red dash.
So tree 94 is located within the building pad location. It is, I wish I had a laser pointer, kind of on the farthest blue dot southeast, on the south. Does that make sense?
Southeast.
So like,
So it's right on the corner.
it's right on the corner of the pad, yes.
And that's a smaller of the trees.
94.
It's this one right here on the exhibit.
Right. And then I'm sorry, I missed the part about the gas meter or the gas line. There's some trees for the gas line.
So he has relocated gas trenching to be off of Falling Springs Road. And so no trees will be impacted by trenching from this relocation of the gas line. Originally, trees would have been impacted, but he located it on the west side of the property. So now no trees should be impacted.
Yeah, he redesigned the site to avoid as many oak trees as possible with the layout.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
I did,
I have a question.
go ahead.
Thank you. Can you speak to the conservation rating? I mean, they're all ranked C or C minus. Is this like a school grade, or does C have some significance?
Yeah. So C means that they're like structurally compromised and or kind of in a state of deterioration. So it was determined that the C kind of or below would be considered structurally compromised or like damaged. And then obviously the lower you go, then they're dead. So
Yeah, I'm just curious, because if it's like school grades, there's no A's or B's, everything's a C, including trees that appear to be structurally sound and healthy.
Yeah, the resolution 9606 does, or 9603 does have a listing of how the tree ratings are, with A and B is kind of really exceptional grade trees in terms of the size and the growth canopy and everything like that. And so anything that's kind of a C minus or below is maybe, healthy to some degree, but has some defects that could compromise the overall integrity of the tree in the future.
All right, thank you.
So there was a kind of a letter included in the staff report addressed to myself from the landscape architect, which walks through all of the trees that are proposed to be removed and what their kind of issues structurally are. So for example, some have signs of termite damage, indicating like safety issues structurally. And then some have bee damage, so their trunks are hollow, etc.
All right, thank you. My other one is just a procedural one, and that is confirming that we are making a recommendation. This matter will go to the city council regardless of what our decision is. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah.
And then we did receive one public speaker comment for this item as well.
Okay. With that, do we have the applicant wish to make a presentation?
I don't believe the applicant is here tonight.
Okay. So do we have any public comments?
Yes, we have a Joe Oren.
Three minutes. You have 3 minutes, sir, and could you state your name and address for our records, please?
My name is Joe Irwin. I'd like to thank you, Chairman Algauer and the board for letting me voice my opinion. I did do a little research, In the 1880s, 60% of this canopy was oak trees. Now it's 5% because of what we have done. The Yucaipa commissions, and I believe February 20th, 2019, adopted an ordinance concerning these oak trees because they deemed they were vital to the thing. And now we're asked to do away with 8 healthy ones and 21 that they say are unhealthy. Oak trees are long-lived. What happened to cause all the death of them in there? They are able to withstand lightning strikes. They often have wounds, but they're still healthy and sound. Oak trees are considered the landscape workhorses. All of California oaks are well adapted to the elevations and to the areas where they live. They provide the backbone for the right plant, right place kinds of landscaping that reduce the need for extra irrigation and fertilization. Oak filter waters. Their leaves filter and accumulate under the oak tree, prevents soil erosion by buffering the impact of rainfall. Leaves, moss help retain the soil's moisture, lowering the soil temperature and discouraging weeds. All water in California flows through oak woodlands. Wildlife depends on oaks. Oaks support over 300 species of vertebrate animals and provide food for more than 500 different types of moths and butterflies. So to say this thing isn't really important, you know, this area of California has more moths and butterflies than any other place on earth. Scientists from all over go up and go down glass roads just to study those. The shade of the oak tree's canopies lowers the outdoor temperatures, which helps with global warming. These oaks produce an ungodly amount of oxygen, and you're telling the contractor or the developer, put in a 24-inch box tree. I'm a licensed contractor by trade. Why don't I go buy a 5-gallon a little tree and put it in a 24-gallon box, 24-inch box, and plant that? I complied. So nothing's to prevent that.
Could we ask you to wrap it up, please?
Yes, Albert Einstein said if the bees disappear from the surface of the earth, man would have no more than 4 years left to live. Oak trees are where bees go to survive the winter. Are we sure we want to do this to this area? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Wow. Yeah. Okay, was there any other, Ben?
No other comments.
Okay, we'll close public comment and we'll move to the commissioners. Start with Lloyd. You have anything? No comment? Okay. Bart?
I appreciate those comments. I think this case illustrates the classic tension between individuals' property rights and the overall societal interests as they're identified by the legislative body, in this case, the City Council. I'm somewhat relieved that the case is going to go to the City Council and allow them to finally implement the policy that they put in place through that resolution. I personally, in this case, I love oak trees, but I think that it appears as though the applicant is going to comply with the terms of the resolution, or I don't think staff would have brought this in front of us. So I'm going to be supporting the recommendation to the City Council.
Chris?
I want to second that, and I want to thank the speaker. That was very educational. Having 5 kids, I got to watch the Bees movie, and it teaches you how important the bees are to us humans and just nature overall. So I believe that balancing act has to be placed on a governing body like the city council with our recommendation. I am interested after hearing the public comment on the comment made about the box tree. So is there any criteria that needs to be met, or is he telling the truth about someone can buy a 5-gallon oak tree and put it in a box? I'd like to know a little more about that.
Well, I think his point on that was they could take one and put it into a 24-inch box and sell it that way. I mean, as they grow, but there's no dimensions, is there, Ben, on inches, the size of a trunk or anything?
So the nurseries are the ones that grow it, so the nursery isn't gonna sell, I guess, improper products, I guess.
Oh, they do all the time. I'm sorry to butt in, but you
So-
constantly get trees that have just been freshly planted. But yeah, I would think there would be some requirement for size of trunk or growth.
Yeah.
because-
The diameter,
So
I
if
would think.
the applicant opts to provide the funds to purchase those trees, then the landscape architect can have a stake in, going to
Does
the
Steve have
nursery
a
or,
pull on the
yeah,
trees?
and
Yeah,
so he will kind of coordinate that purchase.
So that's in the providing funds option. What about if
Yes.
they wanted to replant? Do we have some sort of oversight when we're taking 8 big, healthy trees? We want them to be
Yeah.
bigger than this kind of tree?
I'm sure there would be some level of inspection follow-up
Yeah,
in
as
that
a,
regard.
as a standard condition for the oak tree permit, any work that's done with the oak trees does require consultation with the landscape architect, and so he will, I guess, follow through. So if someone, I guess, tries to sell improper stuff, he's gonna notice that as well. So there is at least that check and balance and kind of impartiality on the city's behalf.
All right, that's all. And again, I appreciate the comments. Never thought of myself to protect trees, but I love that we have that responsibility to do that.
Okay. Yeah, what do you have?
No, just thank you. Thank you for the comments, all the research you did.
Yeah, nothing with me, but thank you.
I hate to see trees outside of the building pad taken unnecessarily. I'm a huge lover of oak trees. I also know that Steve Franken is. So, I will defer to Steve because of his expertise in it and his knowledge. Like I said, I hate to see this many trees outside taken, but I do believe that Steve would be looking at what the overall scope of it will be for the healthy trees to grow bigger. I mean, every oak tree has some damage to it of some type. I have a couple that are close to 200 years old on my property, and there's 200 years of wear and scars and bees and everything else in that. But there is a management process, and again, back to property rights. There is a code in place in the city for it. So, and I'll have to. I have a lot of faith in Steve, so.
And I concur with that. There's a lot of trees coming out, but we do have people like Steve Franklin in place to make the decisions and look at them and hopefully protect, what needs to be protected. So with that, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. We approve case number 20-085, an oak tree permit for the removal of 8 coast live oak trees located 37358 Lime Glen Drive. And ultimately, this is a recommendation to City Council,
Subject to the replacement ratio.
subject to the replacement ratio.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. That will take us to our next case, number 21-043, an architectural review for 33 detached condominium projects.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman Algauer. So the applicant is present here today, Yucaipa 33 LLC, represented by Craig Heaps. And this is for an architectural review for track map 17031. And some prior history on this map is that back in November of 2004, the Planning Commission conducted a public hearing and approved case number 4-107 CUP/TTM 17031, which included a conditional use permit to allow a gated community comprised of 31 detached condominiums, as well as the tentative track map with the one lot subdivision for condominium purposes on the 5.7 acres. The original entitlement expired, however, and so a new application was submitted, and that was case number 16-081 CUP, which utilized the previously approved one lot subdivision for the track map associated with the condo and modified the project to remove a community clubhouse and pool feature and instead included 2 additional dwelling units in its location, now resulting in a 33-unit detached condominium project. The project consisted of 3 different 2-story floor plans ranging in size from 1,990 to 2,323 square feet, as well as 2 different architectural elevations proposed for each floor plan, providing either a Spanish or bungalow and craftsman influence. On June 21st, 2016, this case was approved by the Planning Commission, and the current applicant now proposes new floor plans and architectural detailing for the project. So here's kind of a site layout indicating the different units and then their floor plan style, as well as whether or not it's a reversed or standard footprint. So there's 33 units, as I described, with either a 1,667 square foot single-story floor plan or a 2-story floor plan in either a 2,614 or 3,007 square feet floor plan. 3 different floor plans with 2 different elevation types, having either an elevation type A or type E, are proposed and will be presented on the next few slides. The applicant will utilize reverse floor plans, footprints, for a total of 12 distinct looks. I'm tongue twisting up, I'm sorry. Conceptual landscaping is also proposed at this time and includes an array of trees and plants that fit within our landscape and approved plant listings and will be officially approved via the building plan check process through Steve Franken, the landscape architect, when building permits are submitted for. This is the first floor plan, which is a single-story residence. And here is elevation A for that single story. It's a Spanish architectural style with clay roof tiles as well as stone veneer accents on the base of the structure. And then elevation type B is craftsman influenced with some lap siding, and then we have shingle accents on the kind of projected gable on the front of the structure with stone veneer accents also on the base. This is Plan 2, which is one of the 2-story floor plans. Also in a Spanish architectural style for elevation type A. Similar to kind of the first architectural detailings, there's accents around the windows as well as stone veneer at the base and some different gable elements projecting from the structure for some added building dimension. And then we also have this in the craftsman style, lap siding across, and then some nice shutter accents. And then this is Plan 3, which is an additional 2-story floor plan with a Spanish-style elevation, kind of a porch feature on the front. And then elevation type B is a craftsman version of that. And so that's the gist of the project. There's different color styles provided on the colors and materials board up at the front if you want to review that. And then we have a representative for the applicant present if you have any specific questions in regards to the architectural details.
Before any questions, I'd like to take a minute to address. So at the last May 19th meeting, Mr. Heaps had a project from which I recused myself due to our friendship. And I have done further research into the conflict of interest and ethical rules. that we had to take all these tests for and submit to the city to make sure we're not doing anything against public interest. So I just wanted to put on the record, I did that out of abundance of caution, never experienced that. Other than Mr. Heaps and I being neighbors at the incubator center, I just wanted to put on the record that we don't have any financial ties. I like him and respect him, but then I realized everyone here on this board knows him since he's been here forever. And he's an upstanding guy, so I would not have any bias against his plans other than I will probably scrutinize it more than anyone else. So for that, I will not be recusing myself anymore, so watch out, Craig.
Okay, thank you. Saved me an aggravation. Okay, with that, anyone have any questions for staff at this time before we get? Okay.
I have a question. Go ahead. Just want to confirm, it's going to be a block wall exterior around the whole project, right? Do you want me to say this for you, Mr. Heaps?
Yeah, let's save it.
Okay, I'll save it.
Okay, at this time, we'll have Mr. Heaps make a presentation.
I'll make it quick. Thank you, Ms. Jordan, very much for your presentation. Honorable Commissioner Algauer and
thank you.
members of the Planning Commission, good evening. I don't have too much to say, except, first of all, Mr. Wolf, yes, it's a block wall around the perimeter with gates, and the block wall's already up. You know, this is a project that, coincidentally, with all the projects I've done in town, this was the very first one. And it's just now getting to the construction phase. You know, in 2005, 2006, they started construction, and then when the economy went down, it just kind of sat. And so it was recently sold to the Cardenas Group, and they've stepped in and have done a good job on it. They're actually out there finishing up some of the water and sewer and getting ready to do the streets and moving pretty quickly towards construction. So this is a project that is going currently, and the structural engineering is ready to come in pretty soon. Kind of as soon as we're done here, if everything goes okay, it's ready to come in to be plan checked and so forth. The big change from 2005, 2006 till now is we went from all two-story homes to adding 33% one-story homes, just because it's a popular product type and it just adds that elevation change. So other than that, not much has changed. It still has a tot lot. It still has the gates. It still has the block wall. It's, you know, everything's there. So the same as it was before. So
What type of fencing in between properties?
between properties is vinyl. Yeah,
Vinyl, you said?
vinyl between properties and block on the perimeter.
And then, you know, this has kind of been a discussion point in every meeting we've done about these types of properties. Is there going to be an HOA?
Absolutely.
And is there going to be anything within the HOA about parking within the street, on the street, in front of houses?
Well, the project is adequately parked. It has two-car garages, two-car driveways, and of course, guest parking on the street. Like any HOA, it'll have things like no RVs, no boats, none of that stuff. So there'll be HOA rules that govern it. I think if you go over to the one over here, Iris Gardens between 6th and 7th Street, if you go through there, you'll see there's not parking issues that they, you know, there's pretty much quite a bit. So we're kind of overparked here. We've got plenty of room for the parking.
Anyone else have any questions for the applicant?
Commissioner Markarian? Yeah.
I'm trying.
Go ahead. Just hang on. It takes them a while to get there.
I don't have any questions.
You know, you are holding us up here, but that's fine. No questions?
And no bees were harmed in the development of this property, so, yeah, we're good.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any public comment, Ben?
No comments on this item.
Okay, with that, we'll close the public hearing, and we'll move to the commissioners, and we'll start at the other end. Tony?
I'm glad to see this project develop. It's been setting for a long time. And I'm glad to see it off the ground. I think it'll be a good project. Said the infrastructure's in already. I guess we're just looking at design, right? So it's the same number of lots, nothing significant's changed. And good project to have done, have finished.
Thank you. Richard?
Nothing really. No, I think it's gonna be good for that area down there on Fifth Street. Yeah.
All right, Aaron.
Yeah, Mr. Heaps, thank you. Every time you come to us, it's always a great project.
I don't know about that, but let's move on. Chris, you have anything?
I'll just ask you this,
We found something.
as far as how far along construction has gone, you being the developer, have you taken into consideration all the price hikes in building that's not gonna stall again like it did in '05 and '06?
Repeat that, so I understand.
I just wanna know if.
Without legalese, without
Sure,
attorney
I'll
talk.
speak civilian.
Thank you.
Have you considered the price hikes in construction material as you're moving forward with this project?
Absolutely. Fortunately, prices have gone back down recently from when they spiked recently. They've come back down some, which has been going to be helpful. But yeah, I still think the houses in the neighborhood there, which I have a house right in the street, next street over, are, in the fours, low fours, basically. And I think that's where you're going to be here. You're going to be from the high threes to the low fours. So we're going to be there. It works. I think that the SCIP program, the statewide community infrastructure program that was initiated by the city, that we brought in and was initiated and Ben helped and got put together, has helped the developers to be able to make these projects pencil out where they wouldn't pencil out before. Dealing with school fees, water and sewer fees and so forth, it's pretty hard to deal with. The SCIP program has been helpful to help bond for some of those development impact fees and make things easier for the developer to make ends meet, so.
All right,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bart, do you have anything else?
No comments, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Lloyd? Well, I don't have anything either. Again, I just think it's a great project. And could you get a motion?
Yeah,
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. We'll take it. All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
We knew what item we were on.
Tony likes to make it short and sweet. That's fine.
Push my button again, so.
Okay, the next project we have is a Monte Vista Homes architectural review for 32 units, detached condominiums.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman Algauer. So this is a similar project to the previous architectural review and approval. It's associated with track map 2146, located on 5 acres at the southeast corner of 2nd Street and Burgundy Court. The applicant, Monte Vista Homes, is present here tonight. If you have any questions at the end of the presentation. Some prior history with this track map is that on February 20th, 2019, the Planning Commission approved case number 17-127, a CUP and TTM for a conditional use permit and the 32-unit detached condominium project with the tentative track map for the 1-lot subdivision for condominium purposes. The original entitlement noted that a future home builder would establish their preferred design and submit official floor plans and architectural details at a later date, which would be approved through this architectural review that we have this evening. The applicant and current builder has now submitted a package for the review of these architectural details, including building elevations influenced by both a Spanish and Craftsman style. There were minor site revisions to address final engineering, which included reorienting the internal cul-de-sac and relocating 2 units. And that is being addressed through this submittal, but these revisions are within substantial conformance with the approved entitlement. Here's another site plan of the proposed kind of organization of the units. They're detached 2-story condominiums in either a 1,600 or 1,766 square foot floor plan. So this subdivision is kind of similar to a single-family subdivision, except they'll be required to abide by the multifamily development standards and design guidelines through the condominium ownership of this property. And each of the individual units will include an attached 420 square foot garage. There are 3 different floor plans with 2 different elevation types, having either an elevation type A or type B. And this project will also utilize reverse footprints and include 5 different color schemes. Conceptual landscaping is also proposed and will be reviewed finally through the building plan check process, but this is a nice conceptual graphic kind of indicating the individual units and the different shrubs and landscaping elements that will be incorporated. There is a tot lot still proposed kind of in the central area of the property. This is Plan 1 floor plan, and elevation type A kind of has a Spanish architectural influence with stucco exterior and shutter accents around the windows, which the applicant provided based on preliminary feedback when we received this submittal, so we appreciate that. Added design feature, and we have a craftsman style elevation type B for this floor plan, and it includes some kind of shingle accents on the gable roof projecting over the garage area, and some window treatments as well. And this is Plan 2 floor plan, another single story with elevation type A again in the Spanish style. And the applicant has provided a projected kind of porch element, again, based on our preliminary feedback, as well as shutters around the window panes. And then there's an additional craftsman style architectural style for elevation type B. And then, as I mentioned, there's 5 different color schemes, and the Spanish elevation types will utilize color schemes 1, 2, and 4, while the craftsman elevations will utilize color schemes 3, 4, and 5. And there's some color materials details up at the front if you want to pass those around and better review them in front of you. But
Thank you. Very good presentation, as always. Well, at that time, anyone have any questions for staff? Seeing none, would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Thank you. My name is Steve Landis. I'd just like to thank the commission for being here tonight and the staff. They've been very good to work with so far, and we're looking forward to doing more projects in the city. Happy to answer any questions.
Any who has questions for staff? For the applicant?
I just have the same questions I had for Mr. Heaps. Is what kind of exterior fencing is going to be?
It'll be split face exterior fence and then interior vinyl fence for this project.
And I pretty much know the answer to it. I just want to confirm. Is it gated?
This community is not gated, proposed right now.
The community the adjacent community on Burgundy Court, are they going to have access to the recreation area?
So there's an elevation change from there, so it will be fenced, but they could walk in through the street and use that area. So they don't have access by right, but there's no gate to keep them out, essentially.
So there's no association?
This project does have an association, but it's not gated.
Okay.
So that tot lot does belong to the association who will maintain it, so.
Anything else?
And we prefer not to do gates just because there's a lot of stacking issues in these smaller communities. So we actually prefer not to do gates when possible, because otherwise there's a line of 10 cars waiting for someone to let them in, so.
That makes sense. Okay, anyone have any questions for?
I just want to ask if you've done a project like that before? Or is this?
Oh, yeah, so we're building in 6 different cities right now, so we've done a lot of similar projects, so.
I have another question, kind of concern. And the 3 models that you guys have, the 3 floor plans, 2 of them are Spanish and 1 is craftsman. For the most part in our city, most of what we do is more craftsman style. And I would say we do Spanish, obviously. I mean, we have Chapman Heights as a bunch of them, but we really mix it in very well with the craftsman and the Spanish. So there's not you know, when you look at a community, it's not just all Spanish style. That neighborhood that is on Burgundy, none of those houses are craftsman style. They're all, none of them are Spanish style. They're all more craftsman style. Just for my own personal sake, I think this project would fit better in the community if you had more craftsman homes than you did Spanish style homes.
So I don't have the count in front of me, but roughly half should be craftsman and half should be Spanish. It's the A elevation is Spanish and the B elevation is craftsman. So it should be roughly 50%, but we would be open to more craftsmen if that is something the commission wants. I prefer a craftsman style, like it's a preference, but I prefer that
Right.
myself as well.
And with your plan, and I respect that, but with the plan, it's out of 3 floor plans, 2 of them are craftsmen.
Well,
I mean, 2 of them are Spanish, I keep saying it wrong.
I think there was a mistake in the slide. We have 2 floor plans for our project and 2 elevations for each floor plan. So we have a 1A, a 1B, a 2A, and a 2B. So both floor plans do have a craftsman elevation.
So it should be 50/50.
Okay, so I'm misreading it then.
I kind of like the mixed elevations myself. Makes the community look a little mixed up, but with that,
So my pardon on the typo, it says 3, but then in parentheses, it says 2. So it should read 2 different floor plans with 2 different elevation types.
So we have 4 different looks.
The staff report.
2 Spanish, two craftsmen. But I would be open, like, it should be roughly 50/50. We try not to do a craftsman next to another craftsman.
Right.
So we try to mix it up, but if there's
think
a
it looks better
certain
that way.
lot that you guys would like craftsmen, that would be fine
No,
at your
my
discretion.
concern wasn't a house next to each other. My concern was 2/3 of the property being
Okay.
craftsman and a third of the property, again, I did it wrong, being Spanish and a third being craftsman.
Okay,
So, but it's 50/50 split, and I think that looks really good.
thank you.
anyone else have any questions for the applicant? Seeing none. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.
Good job, thanks.
Huh?
That was great.
Yeah, very good. We have any public comment?
No comments on this project.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing, move to the commissioners. We have any? Well, with that, let's move it on, and I'll make a motion to approve case number 21, the architectural review for the 32 units.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Okay, with that, we have our next one is number 21-034, CUP Architectural Density Bonus Agreement.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman Algar. So this is a density bonus agreement to allow a 100% increase in land density to establish a senior housing project for individuals who are 55 years or older, a conditional use permit and architectural review for the 32-unit senior housing project, and a land use compliance review for a monument sign on the 1.97 acre property. The site is generally located on the east side of 3rd Street, south of Yucaipa Boulevard and north of Avenue E. There's an existing 1,395 square foot single-family residence, which is proposed to be demolished. As I mentioned, the site is 1.97 acres. It is zoned multiple residential RM 72C with the minimum 7,200 square foot lot size and is surrounded by apartments to the north and south and single-family residences to the east and west. And the northern property is additionally another senior housing project. So the site plan is indicated on the screen, and as I mentioned, there will be a housing density bonus request approved through this entitlement for a total net dwelling unit of 16.24 dwelling units per acre, which would establish 32 dwelling units across the entire site. There will be 2 two-story buildings allocated for these 32 units. Access will be provided off of 3rd Street via a 30-foot wide drive approach and an internal drive aisle that's 24 feet, meeting fire access requirements. 46 parking spaces are included in the proposal, as well as that includes 2 ADA spots, and this surpasses the AB 744 state legislation, which requires no more than 0.5 spaces per unit for the senior rental project. It also meets all required setbacks and is 107 feet from the front, 20 feet from the rear, and 45 and 20 feet on either side of the property. A 6-foot solid PCC slump stone perimeter block wall is proposed on the front west elevation and on the interior south property line. And then an existing 6-foot simulated stone vinyl fence is currently on the north property line and is proposed to be extended along the rear property line. And I have a photo of that at the end of the slideshow that I can show you. 40% of the site is to be allocated to private and public open space. A monument sign entry statement is proposed, and a slide will indicate some rough specs of that in a few moments. And site amenities include a dog run, pickleball court, outdoor patio area, and barbecue, private storage units in the rear. Pervious concrete is provided across the subject site to allow for adequate drainage on the property. So as I mentioned, there will be 2 buildings, and each building will have 16 units within. 12 will be 1-bedroom units, and on kind of the either end of the structures, there will be 2 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom units. There's 24 proposed 1-bedroom and 1-bathroom units with 1,082 square feet of living space, and 8 2-bedroom and 2-bathroom units with 1,325 square feet of living space. And per our multifamily design guidelines, required amenities within these units are proposed, including decorative doors, a refrigerator, microwave, washer and dryer, oversized closets, and deadbolts and peepholes will be provided on each unit. There's also an incentive request provided through this project. So because the applicant has agreed to construct at least 10% of the total units for low-income households and 5% of the total units for very low-income households in order to support meeting the city's regional housing needs assessment, or RHNA, per Yucaipa Development Code, the applicant is entitled to request an incentive through this density bonus agreement procedure. An incentive is essentially like a deviation from development standards in order to help accommodate this scope of work. So the incentive requested by the applicant is to reduce the minimum private open space requirement per Yucaipa Development Code 88.021, which typically requires 150 square feet of outdoor living space on a single floor and 100 square feet of outdoor living space on second floor units with balconies. And so the incentive would reduce those standards to 117 square feet for ground floor units and 97 square feet for second story units. That's a lot. Architectural review is also included in this proposal, and this project has a Spanish type architectural style, and I think will match well with the property to the north of it. It has some tower elements projecting on either end of the building, as well as red tile roofs, slump stone accents across, and standard stucco in kind of a tan color across the building. The land use compliance review for the monument sign is also included in this submittal, and will kind of connect with the block wall that will be provided on the front of the property. There's 48 square feet of sign area meeting the development code standards, and the signage will generally display the name of the senior community as well as the address. Landscaping is proposed at this time and includes an array of trees and shrubs, including my favorite tree, the ginkgo balboa. And here are some site photos from kind of my visit to the property. There's the existing house to be demoed. And then here is the vinyl fence that's on the north property line. Notices of the project were sent to all surrounding property owners within the 300-foot radius of the subject property. I received one phone call by a neighbor asking for clarification on the project scope of work, but generally just wanted to make sure that her property would be left unaffected by this project and that the city wasn't kind of taking over any of her land, and so she was in support of the project and appreciative of the clarification. So it's our recommendation that the density bonus request, incentive request, conditional use permit, architectural design and conceptual landscaping, as well as the LUCR signage are approved subject to the conditions of approval. A categorical exemption pursuant to CEQA exemption class 32 is also recommended, and staff would be directed to file a notice of exemption for the project.
Wait till we get the applicant up there.
If you have any questions, I'm here to answer, and we also have some representatives from the project as well.
Thank you. Very good presentation.
And for formal clarification too, the density bonus request will be required to be initiated and approved by city council prior to building permits being pulled.
You know, a question, is there lightings? What kind of lighting is required within the project? Is there going to be lighting within the project, I guess, is the question. Being a senior project.
I generally just saw some lights proposed on the exterior of the building. You can go back to the elevations, I think. Let's see.
Yeah, the applicant is also here.
Yeah,
but-
we can just have the applicant come forth and ask, probably.
I'm Mark Bogue. I'm Mark Bogue. I love talking in front of people, so apologize for that. Thanks. You pretty much hit everything, except that we're gonna put a bunch of solar on it so that it is kind of self-sufficient in terms of energy consumption. And we're adding elevators because the senior housing, which I'm 55 and now qualify for, you know, my knees. The lighting is all going to be LED that is low from a throw, so you don't see it next door. The people next door, they're one stories. That's an important element that we're concerned about. But everything is going to be like the parking lot's pervious concrete, and so it's white in color. So the reflectivity is great, so you can really see at night with lower throw lights. So we're really focused on that, and so that people don't trip and fall and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is simulated stone fencing?
It's precast concrete with slump stone. It's gonna look just exactly like the Santa Barbara Mission kind of a thing. It creates more of a slump stone look, but it's a little more cost effective with the prices and stuff like that. Our family's in the construction business, we pour a lot of concrete. It'll look just exactly like stone, slump stone, adobe stone, and then the smooth finish that you're used to seeing on like a Santa Barbara Mission kind of a thing. Yeah,
Okay.
really clean. We pour a lot of concrete, done it a lot. Won't look like the vinyl fence, without any comment on vinyl fence, right? It won't look like that. It's gonna be first class. Everything's gonna be first class. It's got 2 pickleball courts for old guys with bad knees, because you don't have to move as much. Barbecues and, you know, spaces to hang out. Centralized in the facility so that you're not making noise on your neighbors or anything like that. And then a little bit of storage unit in the back for renters that would want to use like a little mini storage thing, you know, 8 by 15 kind of a mini storage. Put your stuff if you need to.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? Tony, one, nothing?
So pervious concrete is Rice Krispie treats, and the water just rains. When it rains, it goes right into the ground, and there's gravel underneath the ground, and it percolates in, but it also simulates that slow creek runoff. The dog run would be utilized as an overflow to that, but they don't see it being used. If you've ever been to the Beaumont Stadium, that's all pervious concrete. When it rains, the water doesn't run off the side. Yeah, yeah. It all goes into the pervious though. Yeah, we feed it into that. It's basically a retention basin underneath the parking lots. What's the life expectancy? There's some in Florida from 1978, a lot of it. Yeah, we've done a lot of it. That's kind of one of our core businesses. So, the.
Does that require, for your base section underneath it, you have, this might be a question for staff too, but is there he's after me to turn this. So he can hear in the background, sorry about that. Just a question on the water retention or the percolation underneath it, is there some consideration taking place for what the perk is for the,
Yes.
for the site?
Yes, we've done perk tests and made sure that that's gonna work, and that kind of thing.
So that determines the thickness of your base underneath? And
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And it just works fantastic and, solves all those problems. Turns out that oil that spills into the pervious, they found that microbes are attracted to it and they eat the oil. So it's just kind of a natural process. It's kind of a little mini wetlands kind of a thing. Done a lot of it. Just did all of Lake Forest City Hall in it. And it's just, gets a lot of positive attention because it works.
Anyone else have any questions for the applicant?
I was just curious, you're going to figure 10% for low-income housing, 5% for low. How do those numbers work when you have 32 units? I mean,
Yeah, you have to round a little bit.
okay.
Yeah. That's
So
just the way-
basically
that's the way
three-
the standard's written. That's
3 units for low housing, 1 for low.
right. Right.
There you go, Chris, you got a place to move.
That will be established as a part of the formal density bonus agreement, which is executed
Right.
and approved by city council.
Okay, anyone else have any questions for the applicant?
I have one question. Always have a
I
question.
abstain.
I abstain. You don't have to answer. You want to go from 150 square feet to 117 square feet? That's for, like, the balcony?
The ground floor patio.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But the other thing I forgot to is we're double the parking. I think it only requires 16 spaces, and that's ridiculous. We're at like 46 or 47, something like that. So we got way more parking, and then we built some open space so that people can hang out.
Okay.
Like to create a little bit of a community,
And I always ask this question for these senior projects, is this gated?
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
all right.
It's hard to rent without putting a gate on it.
Well, we've had some discussions with some developers about
Yeah.
whether or not, on this street too, whether or not they're gonna be gated or not. And I think senior projects and residential neighborhoods should be gated, safety purposes.
I built the YPAC, right?
Yeah.
I want it to be where people say, oh yeah, that's really nice, like the YPAC.
Yeah.
And we're not interested in, we're not going anywhere.
Well, this is a beautiful, beautiful project, so thank you. We need more senior.
I got more for you.
community. We need more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We need the
Chris
whole
is
north
getting up
bench.
there.
Thanks,
waiting
guys.
for
Thanks
you.
for being patriots. Appreciate that.
Okay. Do we have any public comments?
No comments on this item.
Thank you. With that, we'll close the public hearing and move to the commissioners. Any,
Mr. Chairman, I just had one more question for staff. The density bonus agreement is recorded, is that right?
That is correct.
Thank you.
we also have any?
I do, Mr. Chairman. Again, for staff, my concern is only runoff water. Because you have a density bonus, you're putting more water in a smaller area. And, but I'm sure you're calculating that and.
So I think Landon or Katrina from engineering can speak to the WQMP requirements and kind of the maintenance of that.
Yeah, so as this project will require a WQMP, and within that WQMP, there's a maintenance agreement that has to be in place. So we're aware that sometimes this pervious material can have a maintenance component, and so that will be in place as part of the approved WQMP.
Yeah, it's not just the maintenance side of it, but also, the total runoff is contained within that.
Yeah, so part of the standard conditions require that as a site is developed, no more than the historical flow of water can come off of a site. So they'll do a hydrology study to make sure that it retains the same amount of water that it currently retains, even with the double density.
You know, I have some direct knowledge of the runoff from Yucaipa. I own a piece of property in Redlands that's on the wash. In the last 10 years, we've lost 15 foot of depth in that wash. And so it doesn't work very well at this point. So not that I would hold a project up for it, but I just think that needs to be a concern with what's running off in the city of Yucaipa, because it does affect downstream, along with within the city limits itself too. But you know, it's just a concern of mine personally that we make sure that we get the runoff handled most effective way to, as like I say, it is a long-term issue too. The concrete does over time build up a certain amount of resistance to it, and but as long as that's taken, and you guys do a great job on that, I'm sure you're looking at it, but that's the only comment that I would have on it. Great project, though. It's a beautiful project. I like it very much.
Okay, any other comments? How about a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve case number 21-034 with the A through D recommendations.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, are you going to bore us for a while, Ben, or?
So the next project for the Planning Commission is the draft 7-year capital improvement program. Essentially, the Planning Commission role in this is to review the 7-year program and ensure the conformity with the general plan. And as part of that presentation, Landon Kern will be providing a presentation of the project.
Thank you, Ben, for the introduction, and good evening, Honorable Chairman Algauer and Planning Commission. I get the pleasure of boring or providing you with additional information about our 7-year capital improvement program for you. So there's quite a bit of information in this report that was presented to City Council just this week on Monday evening and approved with no exceptions. Side note as well, you'll see in the CIP, we also have the pavement management programs, which were approved as a part of the annual budget process, similar to the CIP in May of this year. Toward the end of the report, I think Katrina and I are both very involved with the pavement management program. We can certainly answer any questions with respect to that, as well as some of the projects I'll highlight this evening. I'll start out with a quick introduction with some of kind of a larger scale review of our capital improvement program and the funding sources. So on this first slide, you'll see a summary of the funding sources that make up the revenue for our capital improvement program. If we go one slide further, you'll see that a large portion of the revenue sources and funding sources that are identified in the CIP, about 47% of the total, are between the federal and state grants that we are awarded to construct our projects, as well as partnerships with other agencies like the water districts and SBCTA to fund some of the larger projects where there are multi-agency involvement. I think, again, important to note that all of the projects that are in the 7-year CIP have been looked at closely, and they are consistent with the city's general plan, as well as the master plan of drainage that was adopted years ago. Some of the projects in the CIP require a more involved environmental review and impact mitigation process. These are typically the projects that are larger in scale in the drainage category that involve work in our waters of the U.S. and waters of the state. These projects require a very involved process requiring easements and mitigation plans to meet the requirements for the short and long-term maintenance of these areas. And the city's approach, as it has been in the past in accordance with the council-adopted mitigation process, is to do everything we can to mitigate locally within the city of Yucaipa, as opposed to the really the only other option to pay into a regional mitigation bank when we do these kind of projects and the associated impacts as a part of an in-lieu fee program that many other agencies take advantage of. That in-lieu fee program, that mitigation bank, regionally typically costs about in the range of $275,000 to $325,000 per acre. By mitigating locally at parks like our El Dorado Ranch and even the Oakland Creek Corridor, we're able to reduce those mitigation costs into the range of $130,000 to $150,000 per acre. And at the same time, we provide some local benefits to the community here, offering those areas as open space for passive recreation. So with that, I'll jump into really quickly going through a series of projects that have been categorized, and these slides should be consistent with the list of projects that are provided in the agenda report starting on page 387, I believe, of your packets. Starting with the list of projects that have been in process this current fiscal year, and we're expecting them to be done here within the next 30 days or so. As I go through these projects, I think what I'll do is just kind of read them off, and I have a pretty comprehensive, extensive list of notes. If we want to pause, and if there are any questions as we go through these, we can certainly focus on those, and I can go into more detail about the limits of those improvements or the scope as we go through these. So again, these are the projects that we expect to be completed by the end of this month. This particular category we've separated into drainage and the other types of projects that we're doing. So we had an emergency repair work done for a sinkhole that developed at the Kentucky Street crossing of the Dunlap Channel in the Dunlap area. And we had, of course, the El Dorado fire impact a significant portion of the drainage area up in the North Bench. And we were able to secure some grant funding to move forward with some mitigation measures to reduce the impacts for potential mud and debris flows in that area. Those projects are both complete. The citywide directional signage project provided signage throughout town directing travelers to different facilities in Yucaipa, a vehicle exhaust system that was installed at Fire Station number 2, as well as the initial grading phase for the city yard relocation project, which is part of the larger Oakland Creek specific plan, have also been completed. Moving on to the next slide, we have our traffic and sidewalk improvements lists. The most recent roundabout improvements that went in on Avenue E and the improvements in between those two intersections. We are in the process of the final stage of the new traffic signal going in at Oakland Road and 2nd Street. As once again, a part of that Oakland Creek specific plan. Those poles are set to arrive in the next week or so, which is the final stage of that construction. Yucaipa Boulevard widening, this one down between 15th Street and the freeway was just completed very early on in the fiscal year. So those improvements have been completed for some time. And the Chinaberry Street improvements tying into the new signal that went in there on the boulevard across from the new development and the 7-Eleven are complete on the west side of the street. The Avenue A project from Adams Street to 1st Street with the CDBG funding. The 13th Street Sports Complex parking lot was recently completed. That ties into the sports complex and the skate park just next to the Dutch Brothers that's opening soon. And finally, our proposed Wildwood Canyon I-10 interchange project. This is a very long-term process that we are coordinating with the Caltrans and SBCTA. The very initial planning phase for that engineering effort is nearly complete. We're weeks away probably from moving into the next phase.
I have a question.
Sure.
What about phase 3 of the Yucaipa Boulevard widening project?
Currently, our CIP does not prioritize that phase. That did come up on Monday evening, a question from council. So we'll be looking into additional funding sources to move forward into the right-of-way acquisition for that segment in between 16th Street and 18th Street.
My understanding, when that project was proposed to us, the funds were there for phase 1, 2, and 3. when we approved it?
The funding does not include the construction and right-of-way for Phase 3 at this time.
What's our estimate on that?
With the next fiscal year, we'll be looking into that with available funding sources. Right now, it's not prioritized with the 7-year plan that was adopted on Monday night, but we will be looking into additional funding sources.
So we may go the next 7 years without seeing the completion of
With the
this project?
with the adoption of the next upcoming CIP, we will be exploring funding options to introduce that
And
with
when
the
is that?
next adoption next year.
Next year.
A year from now, yeah. And if there are any opportunities in between now and then that become available, I guess this is a good time to introduce, in March of this year, Congress passed the American Rescue Plan as a part of the COVID-related CARES Act. We are in the process of identifying the amount of funding that we're going to receive and the associated requirements and eligibility for projects. Based on our initial review, the funding is limited to water, sewer, and there's one other category.
Broadband.
Broadband, fiber optic broadband. Those are the eligibility requirements at this point. We're going to get a little more information on that and come back to council with any opportunities there for CIP projects. Opportunities like that may come up, and we can certainly present that between now and next year. But okay, I'll go ahead and move into the next category, which is projects that have started this current fiscal year and are anticipated to be completed in the next 12 months or so. We have the second phase of the mitigation measures up on the North Bench in response to the fire. There was a second group of grant funding that was awarded to facilitate that effort we're working on now. The next phase of the City Yard relocation project, installing the building and the associated improvements and infrastructure to support that. The Safe Routes to School 12th and 13th Street Sidewalk project down in the Dunlap area with the federal grant funding to improve access to the Dunlap Elementary School. And 13th Street baseball field parking lot across from the one that was recently completed near the baseball field, across from Dutch Brothers. We have the Oakland Road Neighborhood Park parking lot improvements that will be starting soon. And these series of PMP sub-programs are listed here once again as a part of our annual budget process, the maintenance of our streets with approximately $2 million each year that's allocated to facilitate the pavement rehab projects. The idea with these particular programs, we, as a part of the PMP approval process through council, we have identified these projects to be combined with the 21-22 PMP programs. When we do that, we often get reduced, more competitive unit prices, and we can sometimes add more streets as a part of the increased contingency that's available. With that, we've seen that happen with the last series of projects there. The Wilson 3 Basin Phase 1A grading project, again, a part of the Oakland Creek specific plan, is complete. That initial grading to support the ultimate drainage project and channel and structures for that area. The El Dorado Ranch Park and Five Winds Ranch Park, the Phase 1 grading to support those ultimate park improvements is wrapping up. We're working on that. And finally, the Wildwood Mountain Bike Trail single track, Phase 1 and 2 improvements, about a mile of a new mountain bike single track up kind of near the Wildwood Park. This next category is projects that will be starting this next fiscal year. A continuation of the Wilson 3 Basin project, the Phase 1B improvements, essentially everything east of the 2nd Street crossing, short of the park and the lake improvements that are being accomplished as a separate phase. We have a sidewalk improvements project on 4th Street with some drainage improvements. 2 other sidewalk projects, one in the Uptown area on Adams Street, the other that is the ATP sidewalk project in the Dunlap area on Avenue E and 15th Street. We have a series of traffic signal modifications where analysis was performed, and some of the phasing is being modified to support some protected left turns, one of which is the intersection at the Vaughn Shopping Center, Yucaipa Boulevard and Yucaipa Valley Circle. Again, the pavement management programs that are, the idea is to accomplish these with the prior year as well as one larger program. The Oakland Road widening, Colorado Street to Outer Highway South of Phase 2 traffic signals. This is the phase facilitating the installation of a traffic signal at Colorado Street and Oakland Road, as well as the Outer Highway South and Oakland Road near the Pumpkin Patch. The Uptown parking lot and alley improvements just to the east of the more recently completed parking and alley improvements near the new mural in the Uptown area between California and First, and the Fifth Street improvements, Yucaipa Boulevard to Avenue E, Phase 2 improvements connecting the last phase of improvements that went in to the future roundabout improvements that are going in at the intersection of Avenue E. And then finally, this series of projects are larger scale, multi-year projects that are starting next year, starting with the Wilson Creek Dunlap Boulevard Bridge and Channel Improvements Project. This is a bridge project down near the new development site, the Gateway development near the freeway on Oakland Road along Wilson Creek. The Pendleton Avenue at Oakland Creek Low Water Crossing, one of our last remaining projects through the Highway Bridge Program with the federal funding to elevate the roadway and make it an all-weather crossing.
So Lyndon, I have a question. Do we have a formula to decide which streets get sidewalks and drainage? Do you know?
Depending on the funding available, for example, the CDBG funding, which is a large funding source to facilitate sidewalk improvements in areas of town, is available to us, and that's prioritized through the CDBG grant application process. There are areas in town that are eligible for those grant funds. They're restricted to different zones. And as a part of the prioritization through the council-adopted CIP, as funding becomes available, there are different areas that I have identified to connect missing links between sidewalk. There are other grant funding sources, such as the Safe Routes to School funding, that are also available to us through an application process, and those are limited to certain areas around school zones. So it does depend on the location and the availability of grant funding that typically drives the sidewalk improvements.
And that's something like objective criteria that someone can follow? Or is it just a subjective, council considers this area of the city and they approve that?
As a part of the prioritization of the CIP projects through the budget process, areas that do not have sidewalk are identified and based on available funding, prioritized based on where sidewalk is available and where there are missing connectivities. So, and then of course the right-of-way acquisition that's available as a part of the planning and design phase for those projects.
If I may add as well, as part of the city's general plan, we do have the improvement levels, which do identify the level of road improvements, including sidewalks, and when those are required in different parts of the community. So more kind of the higher density areas require sidewalks as part of a private development project, whereas if you're, let's say, in the Wash area, that doesn't require that. And so as part of a private development project or even the general plan consistency, there are certain areas that don't require sidewalks and then other areas that do, such as schools where they benefit from that pedestrian connectivity.
The only reason I ask is because I was intrigued by the beautiful sidewalks around the roundabouts on Avenue E, where I don't think there's that many pedestrian traffic versus Avenues A and B off of California right in Uptown that don't have sidewalk. And every time we have a festival or something, people are walking in the dark in the middle of the street instead of the sidewalk. So I don't know if there was you're talking about the priority list, if there's a criteria that we can just check off objectively, or is it just a subjective decision by the council?
I guess perhaps a simple response would be the areas that do not have sidewalk, and thank you for that clarification, Ben, on the planning areas. The areas that do not have sidewalk have been identified, and as funding becomes available, we have a process to get them done as quickly as we can to fill in those areas that don't currently have sidewalk. Some of it can also be driven by drainage improvements and what's creating some issues with respect to the street drainage. But primarily, it can be driven by availability of grant funds on where those can happen and how they can be done to improve ADA access in certain areas of the city.
And if I think,
For instance, 7th Street Park, I mean, there's no sidewalks, you know, on Avenue 8. For example, Caesar, who had gotten killed there on Avenue 8, there's no sidewalks, and yet that's a park. And there's a lot of, foot traffic around that park. So does that look at that, Mr. Land? Do they look at that as because of being a park, having a lot of traffic, foot traffic?
Yeah, certainly. All these areas that you've mentioned are logged in our system, and we're aware that there are some areas that don't currently have sidewalks, so they're certainly on our list of projects where we will do what we can to.
and I was going to add, Jess, I think as part of some of the CDBG grants, I think kind of every year at least, quite frequently, uptown-related projects to add sidewalks have been programmed and done, and so there's been kind of throughout the years additional sections being done, and hopefully over time that network becomes more complete.
Okay.
Hopefully those clarifications helped. I think I was moving from the Pendleton Avenue low water crossing to the Wildwood Canyon Road interchange. I mentioned this prior category. This next phase is the second of basically 3 phases through the Caltrans process. It's more of a longer term, kind of a 3-year process with the EIR that's completed and the more advanced studies on the alternatives that were presented with the initial PID phase. Next to the County Line Road Corridor Project, the Bryant to Kalamasa Boulevard. This is the LPP grant that we partnered with Kalamasa and been successful in procuring those grant funds to facilitate the intersection and street improvements along that corridor. Next, the Avenue E at 5th Street, the dual lane roundabout intersection improvements. Wildwood Canyon Mountain Bike Course Single Track Phase 3. This is an extension of that project that is wrapping up now. And finally, our last Highway Bridge Program funded low water crossing replacement project at Wildwood Creek down near the pumpkin patch on Live Oak Canyon Road. The preliminary design phase will be initiating next year. This is a list, again, with the pavement management program subcategories and primarily the streets that are being rehabilitated. These are the lists of streets through the council adopted program for 2021 that will be combined with the next slide, 21-22, to be advertised as one bid package as each of those sub-programs is completed in phases to facilitate the rehab of all of these streets. And I think we have one more slide showing the next 5 years that has been adopted that as a part of that council action back in May of this next 5 years here. And I think there's a couple more slides. We can move on. This is general comment. We're not recommending any new projects this fiscal year with the amount of projects that we have on our list. I think there's one more slide with just a summary of the estimated costs that we have in the 7-year CIP that will be over the next 3 years for construction of these improvements, over almost $41 million with the different categories outlined there. Actively moving on a lot of these projects and moving forward with the design and construction, and we'll have about 27 projects I think that we've highlighted tonight, 10 of which are the Wqmp program, so we're gonna have about 18 separate construction contracts we anticipate managing. And
A question, when you take into consideration the cost of these projects, does the cost of the acquisition of the property, is that a large percentage of the cost of the project, or that's not, figured in? Or
these costs do include their right-of-way costs. I don't have a percentage offhand. I could get that information for you. Depending on the project, It varies depending on the project and the scope of that and the limits of work.
And if I may add, as part of it, part of the capital improvements that we do, particularly for, let's say, like roadway projects, are designed to minimize kind of the right-of-way acquisition impacts and some of those construction costs. So examples, the roundabouts, which allow for the same throughput design or level of service that a traditional kind of larger intersection does, but without nearly as much cost being invested to acquire property or to take away land from properties to provide that throughput.
So that concludes the information that I wanted to highlight for you this evening. Again, I have more detailed information if we need to review any of these other projects or go into more detail, or if you have general questions.
I just have a comment. I think on page 385 of this handout that we got, the top says 2002 to 2021.
That's
I think
correct.
that meant 2020 to 2021?
Actually, so good question. The pie chart you see on page 385 is the funding sources that are actually summarized for, let's see, 19 years there. So that is correct. That is the $193 million is the funding for those years 2002 through 2021. So that's kind of a longer term summary there versus that 40 million that's identified in construction costs for the next 3 years.
And then my second question was gonna be as far as, so are we supposed to recommend the approval for the 7-year capital improvement program?
Yeah, I think it's informational only, isn't it?
I believe maybe Ben can clarify the action tonight is for the findings that they're consistent with the general plan.
Yeah, so just finding that the listing of projects is consistent with the city's general plan. And so as part of this draft CIP, council did review it at their Monday city council meeting, and then following this action, the final CIP would be included with the city's annual budget at the next city council meeting. So it's just a finding that these listing of projects are consistent with the city's growth visions.
And on that note, so,
That was your last question.
no, I haven't started yet. Thank you, Lyndon, that was a great presentation. My question is, as far as, I have 3 minutes? I wasn't in the sun today. My question is about, there was a discussion I had, I think you were part of it when I first got on the planning commission, of what our projection is of the city growth and what is the capacity that the city would hold as far as our roads go, the facilities go, especially when we were talking about, I was involved with Inland Leaders' petition for a second high school. Or at the soccer complex, if we're gonna have public use of that, or recreational facilities such as pools, especially with 110 coming up. Are these part of the CIP as well? Are these things that the CIP considers, or is it mainly more maintenance and maintaining instead of creating?
Maybe I'll start and Ben can clarify, but all of the capital improvement projects are designed and built to the ultimate build-out traffic projections. Okay. So the roundabout improvements, for example, has been mentioned. Those improvements were analyzed as a part of a traffic study. They can accommodate the ultimate build-out with less right-of-way impacts as opposed to the other option, which would have been widening to 4 lanes and traditional signalized intersections, taking much more right-of-way and properties. So in general, yes, the capital improvement program and these projects that you see are all designed and constructed to be consistent with the ultimate build-out traffic volumes.
What is the ultimate build-out for Yucaipa on housing?
The city, as part of the city's 2016 adopted general plan, the build-out's about 80,000.
80,000, that's what I remember. You were there too, but you were having too much fun.
There you go again. And what is the build-out now? Where are we at on that?
55?
The city's population is about 54,000, and as part of the build-out conditions, it's both in terms of residents, so the number of homes or dwelling units and that capacity, but then also, commercial space as well. So it's the kind of combined activity level that's happening within the city as part of that build out. And so as Lana mentioned, for some of these different projects, there's items called out or improvements identified in the city's general plan to help facilitate that overall build out condition. And so these are just little pieces chipping away to help support that growth, that as projects, private development projects happen, we have the infrastructure in place to help support that.
And as we approve these projects, sidewalks, curbs, and gutters get put in
Yes.
as projects get approved.
Yes, a significant portion of the CIP, although they're sometimes characterized as street improvement projects or intersection improvements, they almost always include the sidewalk and curb and gutter and drainage improvements.
And some of it, I guess, is kind of a split. So for the sidewalk projects, for example, a new private development project within, improvement level 1 would be required to install new sidewalks as part of that. But in the uptown where you have mostly built out condition for some of the different neighborhoods in there, there's not going to be a project where someone is actually doing sidewalk development for that. It would be a city capital improvement project that actually, initiates that process and provides that infrastructure.
So what did you say was the final capacity or the build-out projection for Yucaipa?
The city's general plan build out's about 80,000.
Until we occupy Kalamasa.
Oh, Glenn.
I have a couple of specific questions. One is on 13th Street on the parking lot, the baseball fields. Is that a city project funded by city, or is there a contribution from National League, or is it primarily for the high school field that the city owns, or what is that?
Right, it is a city project that is for city funds. It's improving access, adding a drive approach to Thunderbird Way.
So that's just supplemental parking for everything from the skate park to the baseball fields. I know it's classified as baseball fields, but. And then my other question was on Oak Glen Road at Colorado Street, and that widening, the improvements. It's a signal light, I understand it, at Colorado.
Correct.
And that's to support the development of the gas station that's across the street?
It is a part of Colorado Street is a little further up from the AMPM. That intersection with the proposed signal, is that Colorado you were speaking about?
Yeah, at Colorado, there's a proposed
Hotel
gas station that's in
development.
there now. I don't know that that's been presented, but I know that's been talked.
Yes, so that intersection is a part of our development impact fee program. So the installation of a signal there as a part of that DIF project would help facilitate economic growth as the Yucaipa Boulevard is
And
done.
then as it goes on down over the freeway, on the frontage road, that's the improvements to and a signalized intersection at the frontage road?
Exactly. We're Outer Highway 10 South intersects with the Live Oak Canyon. Same information. The DIF program includes that intersection improvements that would help stimulate economic growth. That would also serve as the potential entrance to development on the east side of Live Oak Canyon Road there.
Okay. And then also, you said the low water crossing past the pumpkin patch?
Yes.
Okay.
So as you proceed out of Yucaipa going down Live Oak Canyon Road, there's a low water crossing before it kind of turns into Redlands and turns down. That is the last remaining highway bridge program project that's funded through that Caltrans FHWA funding. And we're just initiating the preliminary engineering and environmental for that, which is going to be a multi-year process.
So on that, I know there's a proposed project on the old Palmer property that's just past that crossing. Is there a contribution, or is there anything that comes from the developers on that, or is it all city funded?
That particular grant through the Caltrans is about 89% funded through FHWA funding.
Okay.
Our local match component, I believe, does have some PMP funding and development impact fee program. So as a part of the DIF, those contributions from the development will provide that local match component.
So in the future, between that project and the development of the pumpkin patch, maybe potentially, and then also the developer on Colorado Street, it's all impact fee money that would come off of
Exactly.
that. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm new to this side of it, so just trying to
Great questions. Yeah.
see where it all goes.
I have a question for you. I know we want to leave. I just have one question. Where are we with the grant for the Dunlap Neighborhood Park? Have we heard about if we're getting any money for that?
I believe there is a new application that was submitted for Prop 68 funding that we're waiting to hear back on. I could be mistaken. Do you know?
I think Todd had been working on that, so
Yeah,
I
I think
believe
there
there
is
was
a-
submitted.
There's an application that is either in progress or has been submitted for Prop 68 funding for that, and I don't believe we've heard back yet on that.
So we didn't get funding from the last grant application we wanted? So we're starting over again?
There'll be a new grant, and then we are, as part of a different project, it's not part of the capital improvement, but related to supporting housing development, since there are some of our affordable housing sites nearby there. Designated as part of our housing element. We are going to be doing the utility design for connecting the water and sewer for those sites, and it would include providing the connection for that. So when a private development project comes through, we can help set up some of those infrastructure development costs for the park and reduce that and help kind of bridge that gap a little bit better.
Are there preliminary plans for that park?
There was a conditional use permit approved by the Planning Commission for that
lake.
park
I
development.
thought I had seen it,
And
yeah.
an amphitheater, and it's really nice. And remember we approved that? The lake, and the amphitheater, and all that stuff?
Oh, yeah.
It's just, it would be, for that area, kind of going into Dunlap, it'd be nice to get that project.
Well, there's more families that would utilize that park in Dunlap than probably any other park around because the
Yeah.
low income, there's a lot
Yeah.
of minority families that live down there with kids in the school there on Dunlap. That'd just be a great development.
And there's sidewalks that we're gonna put in over there, and
Yep.
so.
Yeah, some of the projects in the CIP add sidewalk in this area for access to that park.
And with a lake, there'd be a place for the homeless population.
We have 2 lakes in town.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good. I think it was some great information. Thank you, Ms. Landon. Of course. Very good.
Thank you.
Appreciate it a lot.
Is there going to be a motion, I guess, to adopt the findings of general plan conformity for the draft CIP?
So that was my question. So most of the presentation is over the next 3 years. Are we gonna do the whole 7-year?
So it's part of the 7-year program, and then every year we come back with essentially revolving through that 7 years. So it's kind of where we're at now, and then next year it comes back again for that 7-year chunk. And so slowly we keep chipping away, and as a kind of revolving.
Just to check and make sure that all the projects are within the general plan.
Yep.
Then I make a motion.
I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any other discussion?
Is, clarify that it's a motion to approve the finding that's been recommended by the staff.
By staff, correct. That it conforms within the general plan. The 7 years.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Chris, no?
No?
You're great, okay. Unanimous. Madeline, are we okay?
Ben has one more presentation, I believe,
Okay.
this evening.
Go ahead, say it. We're waiting for you.
I'm not doing it. I did the other ones.
Okay, as everyone know, that at the city council meeting, they did approve the rodeo. And just to warn you, tickets we're going crazy already, people wanting tickets. That's definitely going to be a sellout. So
What's the date?
the first weekend in August, 6th and 7th of August, Friday and Saturday night. So
Do we get free tickets for being on the planning commission?
everybody but you, Chris, I ran out. I'm sorry, I ran out.
The conflict of interest.
Yeah.
All right, so the last item I have is just kind of a quick workshop and kind of study session for the Plan Commission. As the commission or some of the commissioners know, every year the League of California Cities does the Planning Commissioners Workshop. However, with COVID, we really haven't been able to take advantage of that kind of learning opportunity for kind of the new commissioners. And so did want to just try and do a workshop, and if there's other topics that the commissioners would like to learn about, happy to bring that back as well. But this one's really focused on findings and kind of giving a little bit more information for your toolkit to make sure that you guys are working effectively and providing good decisions or good foundation for the decisions that you guys made as part of your role as planning commissioners.
So they will be doing one this year?
There'll probably be one this coming year in 2022.
21. 22.
22. Yeah.
Okay.
So they did have a kind of workshop thing, but it was all kind of at the computer kind of stuff. Nothing quite as immersive or I think probably as valuable as actually being at the conference. Sacramento?
Sacramento. Oh, God. I'll look.
I think it bounces. It may actually revolve, but I've been to the one in Sacramento, which is
Yeah, we went to Sacramento.
vacation destination of mine. So.
Not supposed to be a vacation.
All right, so quickly, so what are findings? Findings are really how explaining how we received a decision and serve to kind of document the thought process in making that decision. And so as part of it, kind of think of it as why did we take such an action? Why did we approve a project? Why did we not? And that is essentially what a finding is meant to do. Now, the purpose of it itself is to provide that framework for that decision-making process and really making sure that administrative record and process is well-defined. It is intended to provide kind of the facilitation of the analysis and reduce the likelihood that we just randomly jump to a conclusion. So we're just making a decision off the cuff, but really having reviewed the project or that decision, what the facts are based on the evidence of the record and how it complies either with the city's general plan and code or it doesn't. And then that way we have that kind of process a little bit more articulated. And as part of it, it does, as a different side of it is, let's say the planning commission takes a decision on a project, either the applicant wants to deny the project or overturn that decision, or let's say another community member, is it really kind of sets the stage of what was the issue and then what is the resolution to address it. So it's providing that judicial review and remedies for an applicant if they want to appeal the decision that's made. And then also as part of, if it does go to a court case following a city council review and approval, it really does set kind of the basis for the decisions that were made by the city in the review of that project. And so when are findings necessary? They're really as part of the adjudicatory role or non-legislative project. So a lot of what the Planning Commission receives, including variances, the conditional use permits, tract maps, and other design proposals are subject to meeting certain findings, and those findings are listed in the city's development code under the processes for each respective application. However, for legislative actions, they're not necessarily required, let's say for a general plan adoption or rezoning. However, our city's development code does include some findings that are required as part of that decision. There's also, law does have some additional provisions on how findings work in terms of housing projects, which I'll get into. And then kind of the final provision is when we have our findings and our approval of a project and conditions that we issue on a project, is that there does need to be a rough functionality or rough proportionality to that. So essentially, the project is creating this impact. Our decision on mitigation or other stuff has to relate to the impact that's being presented. It can't just be additional measures for the sake of adding additional requirements for a project, but really that there is this nexus between the two. And so there are two kind of key land use planning law Supreme Court decisions, the Nolan and Dolan cases as they're referred, that kind of address that as well. So I mentioned housing law.
Question.
Yes.
Are these findings usually done by staff or planning commission or both?
So the findings, and I'll have a slide on as well, is prepared in draft form by staff. And so as part of the end of the staff report, you'll find, either a topic of 7 different things, and our motion says adopt the findings as contained. But the planning commission, as part of the decision, ultimately is the one that takes ownership of the findings. So if you're approving a project, you're either agreeing to the findings or adding to it if you want, or if you're denying a project, you're finding it at fault with those findings. And conversely, if the city does provide a project and recommend denial of it, we'll have findings prepared that recommend denial and show that limitation. The Plan Commission does have the authority to kind of weigh that out, and if they find findings that are different than ours, then that's a process. But ultimately, as a decision-making body, the Plan Commission is the one that adopts and formally recognizes that these findings are therefore valid.
And most of the findings are already for approval. Like, how often does the staff come up to the planning commission and say, we have this project number, this and this, we recommend you not approve it?
It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen on occasion. Normally when we do a project and we do try to steer the applicant to a successful outcome, we don't necessarily want to waste their time and money with a project that is not going to be passed or has significant deviations, or at least try to get them in the right direction. However, there's no limitation on who submits a project and what project they submit, and there are some projects that I've come across that are so far from left field of what the city code would allow that in those cases, certainly we would proceed with the denial and let them know that that's the case. And then there's,
I haven't seen one that staff recommends us deny.
I think
I've been on the commission for about a year and a half,
Yeah.
2 years now.
I've never seen one.
There's been a few that we've done here, but as I mentioned, we definitely try to work with the applicant even from the early conceptual stages. So when they're thinking of a project before they even come to submit, we try to steer them in the right way, because we don't want to necessarily have them spend the time, money, and energy to design a project that isn't something that's supported by our code and would be denied. But there's no limitation from them to proceed, but we try to sway them in a way that is successful, which is we certainly do as part of the city's approach to customer service and working with them, as we want to make sure that we're getting them in the right direction, and then certainly also setting the stage of what the expectations are of the community, so then that when they submit a project, it's very transparent of what the process is supposed to be.
Something, Chris, that they have done is when we used to get projects for all of those carports, garages, sheds, remember all those in the backyards a couple years ago?
Yeah.
They would recommend for approval and we would deny them all the time. And because they didn't meet to our standard as a planning commission and what we felt was the city standard. We didn't deny every single one of them, but we denied a fair share of them.
Quite a few of them.
And then they started coming with, next thing you know, everything is the way we wanted it. Like, they were telling,
Setbacks and stuff.
yeah, and they were telling the developer, whoever wants to put that in, hey, this is the expectations of the planning commission, and you need to do this, this, this with the paint, the material, all that kind of stuff. And then they started bringing us those projects the way we wanted the projects, what they knew we would approve and not approve.
Do you, Ben, do you and Madeline, tell somebody when they come to the counter, well, the staff, planning commission more than likely will not approve it?
So, yeah, generally speaking, when I'm providing customer service at the counter, let's use a metal garage as an example, I will explain the kind of best case outcome that we've seen through approved projects of, providing color schemes that match the existing house, maybe some trim elements if it's more visible on the street, asking for added building facade details if that's, a base color differentiation from the primary, just so that it is a more appealing and aesthetic structure, especially because it would be visible from the street. So we do try to provide that guidance to applicants. And for example, the Bogue Senior Housing project that you just approved, when in my preliminary review of the project, I'll go through with our development code standards and review the project and determine if it's an incomplete submittal or a complete submittal. And part of that completeness is understanding if it conforms to the development code and our standards that are in place there. So, for example, if parking was an issue in the initial submittal, he would come back with a second submittal and I'd re-review based on the AB 74 state legislation. So that's the same for any project across the board. If an applicant continues to want to pursue those deviations from the code, they might, apply for a variance at that time too, which would include further review from Planning Commission, and we discussed that in a staff report. And so, yeah, the deviation from the Bogue project too with the incentive is kind of a unique circumstance in that they're doing affordability component, but if there wasn't an affordability component, that would have probably been a variance. And if the planning commission wasn't in kind of a stance of approving that, then you would have more leniency because that's outside of our development code guidance.
And I will kind of add, so we do try to talk with potential applicants early on to figure it out. If they do have a project that maybe doesn't quite meet everything, but they're open to ideas, we'll give them suggestions on how to possibly redesign the project or kind of find a way. At the end of the day, people do have ideas of what they want to do for their property, and so we try to find a middle ground that can help kind of achieve that and kind of work with them. The Bode project is a good example where before he even submitted the project, I met with him a few different times to work on the architecture, the design, and the context in relationship to some of the surrounding development to really make sure that when it went through the process, it's as smooth as it can be. Not everyone's as receptive to ideas, but we try to at least provide those tools and opportunities so it isn't as daunting or bureaucratic, I guess, in that regard.
Well, as far as affordability, in the city of Yucaipa, are we where we should be?
So we have not met the regional housing needs assessment, and so we are short of that in terms of every income category, and then the next upcoming housing cycle is much more stringent. This is actually, I guess, a good dovetail to kind of the findings and housing law. So as I mentioned, we do have, as part of our project review, findings that do need to be met. As part of the threshold for findings on residential projects, the bar is much higher due to state law. So one of the bid laws that has come into effect is kind of a enhancement to the original Housing Accountability Act through SB 330. And really, it kind of sets the stage that if a project's consistent with your code requirements, all objective design standards, the city is not able to deny that project. If it meets all your requirements, then the city should be approving those projects. And so really, in terms of that, we do the review for the applicable objective design standards that are in effect when that application is deemed complete. And then also with the preponderance of evidence, addressing those issues if there are. And then if there are certain negative impacts, there is very specific requirements in which the Planning Commission has the authority to deny a project, but we definitely, the bar is very high, so the findings have to be very rock solid for a decision to deny a housing project and identified very early on in the process. Additionally, as part of affordable housing projects itself is the cities should not be or cannot disapprove certain affordable housing projects or provide conditions that essentially scale down the size of the units, really unless you have, based on preponderance of the evidence in the record, other elements going on. Part of it too is, is the city compliant with the housing law and have we met the RHNA or exceeded the RHNA, the regional housing needs? We have not. And so that certainly sets that higher bar where we don't have met our need of affordable or the different income ranges. And so in that case, we should be trying to facilitate the development of those units. However, we still get to ensure that they're compliant with our code requirements and those provisions.
But real quick, something that came up a couple years ago when Paul was still here is we discussed what is that threshold? What makes a low-income housing? And if I remember correctly, Paul said it was anything under $450,000. So if you guys can look into that and see what that threshold is now, because we talked about why, if you guys remember, we were building all these stack houses and we were approving so many of these projects, but how those, instead of having big apartment complexes come in, because our condominiums, if you will, aren't real condos, like what we thought condos were when we were growing up. They're the projects we approved tonight. You guys are calling them condominium projects, townhouse projects, but they're all smaller homes, even if they're 2-story, on small lots with small setbacks.
So there's kind of that threshold in it based on the area median income categories, and so you have kind of the above the 450 range is your your above moderate housing threshold. So anything that's relatively expensive or at least kind of upper kind of scale stuff. The condominium projects usually tend to fall within that moderate income range, you know, kind of that starter home descriptor. So that would be, you know, the 300s to kind of the
But my understanding is that counted towards the affordable housing.
It does. So the RENA numbers is broken down into 4 different income categories. So you have very low income, moderate income, and then you have your above moderate income. And so all 4 categories pursuant to state law are still important. Certainly the more affordable units are a little bit trickier to get developed just because of the, you know, you have your kind of break even point. It usually requires some sort of subsidy or additional funding source. And that's part of the incentives of the development code, or at least those waivers, is to help kind of offset some of those costs. So if you go a little bit denser, you can get a little bit more yield, and that will offset some of the lower rents that would be associated with that type of project. But all 4 categories, as part of the regional housing needs assessment, are what we have to achieve. And so as part of, let's say, denial of affordable housing project, it's looking at, okay, are we on track for that income category, or are we not? And if we're deficient, then we definitely want to make sure that we're taking as a policy approach, consistent with state law, trying to facilitate that development and not necessarily denying a project for the sake of denying a project. But through that process, we definitely try and make sure that they're compliant with code. That's kind of our purpose here, is to make sure that we're getting projects that meet what the expectations are, regardless of what the income category is that's proposed. Now, as part of the general format for findings, as I mentioned, each staff report does include draft written findings, and they do need to describe why we arrived at the decision. So really, kind of, if you look at the findings we have, there's always kind of that because clause. So it's consistent with the general plan because. It is not going to have a detrimental impact because, and so there's a descriptor of some of the development code requirements, you know, if it meets and exceeds the setbacks, provides the lot coverage requirements, it's consistent with the general plan policies, and that stuff is the purpose of kind of setting that. And it really does tie the findings to the city's plan standards or code. So as part of the review for projects, it really is kind of the bar is going, is this a project that meets our requirements? Now, as I mentioned, the bar is a little bit higher for residential projects. It's, you know, if you're allowed to build 40 units or 40, you know, single-family lots, and this meets all your setbacks, your lot sizes, then you're consistent there. Commercial projects have a little bit more discretion just because there's a little bit more nuance to the operational characteristics of a commercial site versus residential. House is a house in terms of kind of that zoning perspective. Now, as I mentioned, or kind of the descriptor is, so the Plan Commission role is to essentially act on a project based on the evidence in the record and the facts of the project as part of the findings. Our role as planning staff is to prepare those plans for review and essentially get it to the decision-making process. Part of it's assessing the project for consistency with the code and general plan requirements, working with those applicants to address areas of deficiency, and then completing the analysis of potential environmental impacts pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, preparing those draft conditions of approval that necessitate kind of what the requirements are as they build out the project through those different stages of prior to issuance of building permit, prior to occupancy, and then the ongoing requirements. And then finally is preparing that draft staff report and draft findings, preparing the staff report and draft findings for which outline the recommendations based on the analysis. And so that really is kind of the summary of it, but really just kind of sets the findings are the backbone of the decision that you guys made for a project. And so whatever decision you guys do, either to approve a project, making sure it's consistent with everything, or if you choose to deny, is really setting aside where is that deficiency at. So if someone wants to appeal that denial, they know exactly what the discussion point is that necessitates that appeal process.
On top of the findings that we usually adopt from the staff, how often does the Planning Commission have its own finding?
The Planning Commission can do that for any project, or if there's something where you go, you know, we see staff's findings, but we also agree that this project does this, this, and this, you can certainly add that to the narrative as well. It's really just setting the foundation for why you guys are taking the action that you guys are.
So we can add a finding, can we remove a finding?
No, the findings themselves, the core findings are what's required as part of the development code. So you can add detail to the findings if you go, okay, finding number 3 for this project says this, but I also think it should be included in the record that the project also achieves this. you're more than welcome to do that. But the number of findings are dictated by the development code, and so we have to stay within that constraint.
Oh, the number of findings is dictated by code?
So yeah, as an example,
So I want
The
to
Bogue
use the
project.
example of the speaker today who was presenting about the oak trees, for example. Let's say the city staff says removal of these 8 oak trees is not gonna be that big of a deal. We're gonna have 10 replaced or paid for the city to replace somehow around the city. And then someone presents that, hey, no, this is not how it works, this is how it works. I'm using that as an example, not like he did that today. But can we say, okay, well, the finding that the staff found for the 8 to be removed and replaced by the 10, we're not gonna go by that, we want it replaced by 15.
so part of that is a little bit difficult. So the replacement ratio, let's say, for example, of that oak tree permit is what specified in the resolution for the oak tree preservation requirement. So that's actually in the policy, that's what the replacement ratio is. Certainly, Plan Commission can ask for slightly different stuff, but in terms of that nexus or rough proportionality, you could, if you try to, I guess, ask for too much, you could run into that challenge where they go, okay, this impact is much larger than what we're actually talking about in terms of that scale. And so there's a little bit of nuance, I guess, to that, but it's in that particular case, it's set through the resolution. So the resolution says if you're tearing out a tree of this category, this is the replacement ratio. If you're of this tree, and so it's pretty black and white in terms of what that requirement is. Now, in terms of the findings itself, so as an example, the Mark Bode project, there's 7 required findings listed under that conditional use permit application. And those findings themselves are what's listed under the procedures section of the city's development code that tells, as part of the processing for a project, these are the 7 kind of requirements you need to do. So one is, what is the environmental impact? What is the size adequate in size and shape to do the project? Is it consistent with our code? It's designed to provide natural passive heating and solar. And so all those requirements are listed in our development code. And so those are the 4, the basic finding requirements. And then we, for each project, write the because. It is consistent because it provides this. And then we tailor that discussion specific to each individual project to help articulate why it meets either the findings as identified in that processing procedure requirements or it doesn't.
But we don't have to agree with the city's findings.
No, so
That's our discretion to say, no, I don't agree with that. Or, we've denied several projects just based off of, or I've said no to several projects just based off of safety concerns that I've had. And so it meets all the city's findings, but I don't think it's where they're putting the tot lot right next to the street with no barrier is a safe location for kids. But most of the time when we've done that, a developer is pretty amenable to changing.
To conform with safety stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of it is, as part of it is identifying which finding is deficient. So you say, hey, I disagree with finding number 2 because of this. Now, as I mentioned, the residential kind of side of it is a little bit trickier because there's a lot more, that bar is much higher than other projects. But for commercial, it could be, hey, in talking with learning about the project from the applicant, there may be greater noise impacts that we're just not comfortable with the setting. And so then that would be a rationale for then either adding a condition that would address and help you meet that finding. So with this additional condition, I can now support the finding, or vice versa. Hey, there's nothing that they can do. This project just is going to create an issue with one of these findings, and therefore that's your grounds for denial.
But we have, if we deny a project, we has to be part of one of the findings, is that right?
Yeah. So it has to be articulated why you're denying a project and where it falls short in terms of meeting the requirements for approval.
Like the one on 6th Street, we have 6th Place. We didn't feel that road was adequate for the project, but that wasn't part of the findings. Right? So, but we just more or less felt that should have been addressed somehow.
You mean the one on
6th Place or whatever it was?
The Avenue H project. So that was more the condition, and that's ultimately the plan commission approved the project, but it was concerns about the condition of the pavement management of that road wasn't necessarily an issue of the project itself. The project met the code requirements, and so it was, you guys had added in a condition to coordinate for those road improvements, but it wasn't necessarily something that would hold up the project because it didn't meet the code requirements of the city. It's just that that road should be in the PMP, and it is in the PMP, so it should be worked on, so.
Okay.
So that's all I have for that. If there's any other kind of workshops you guys would like to have, I'm happy to provide it. I love to talk about planning stuff, so. It's really just kind of.
Hey, you should present at the next League of Cities. This is nice. Short and concise.
Yeah, but so it really just kind of sets that, but because the League of Cities didn't really have, I think, a good planning commission, Commissioners Academy kind of thing, it's, you know, I wanted to give you guys the tools so that you guys feel comfortable with the decisions that you guys made, and feel comfortable with that role, so.
Other than ethics training, required ethics and conflict of interest and all the forms we have to fill out annually, is there like a link where some laws are come up that planning commissioners should be aware of that we could probably get just to check out?
So the League of California Cities does have, I think, a pretty good repository of different memos that they've issued. Certainly, I'm happy to provide any workshops or bring information on certain laws, and happy to engage our city attorney's office for that. The commission may recall a number of months ago when we did our first workshop on the housing element update, we did include a presentation of a number of the housing laws that impact that process. So you guys had a good context, and so we've been working through that process with the update, and we'll be bringing that back to the Plan Commission soon. But just kind of setting the stage of some of the either new requirements that have come into effect and how to best navigate those requirements so that we're all kind of staying, I guess, on solid footing of our collective decisions.
It'd be nice to know, at least with the beautiful state of California's changing laws on residential and commercial, that would impact our decisions.
Yeah.
And we do, just as reference to, any pending legislation is also included as one of the topics of discussion for city council meetings. So usually Ray Casey, the city manager, will give kind of brief update, hey, this is working its way through the legislature. It may have an impact on the local jurisdiction, just so that the city council is aware of that. And if they want to offer a letter of support or opposition, they can direct staff to do that as well, that at that caliber.
There's,
Oh, you get those, Bart? I mean.
yeah, there is a, and I know because I used to subscribe to them, a number of the land use attorney firms in the state who are involved in all this do updates. Sometimes you'll get them weekly, and you can sign up to be on their email list. And I don't know if our city attorneys do. I know Best and Krieger does, and a number of the other municipal law firms do.
Like a listserv kind of?
Listserv, yeah.
I know we do get, or I receive correspondence from our city attorney's office on key legislation that way I can make sure that if we need to update any procedures or policies, I at least have that reference point. Because certainly a lot of laws that happen throughout time, and so it can be sometimes hard to keep track of that, and we want to make sure that we're staying abreast of that and making good decisions. So other than that, the only thing I have left is to introduce Christian Farmer, which is our new assistant planner as well. So we have some additional staff to help with our project process.
Yep.
I was wondering the interest and the motivation to sit through all of this. But
So
welcome to the team.
We're not replacing Madeline at all, are we?
no, it's to
Don't allow that.
It's to provide support. We have a lot of projects that are coming through. Madeline has certainly been presenting a lot of projects, and yeah, we have a pretty good stat for you guys to review in the next couple of months. But yeah, he'll be presenting at a future Plan Commission date. And other than that, thank you guys for your time. And
beautiful. And
Thank you guys.
I just want to add what a pleasure it is. And Ben, I know
me? Oh, no.
not you. To have a knowledgeable staff and a professional staff, and how well you guys do with the public, and how well you present to us. I know I need the education, so I appreciate the nuances and your patience with us. So I thank all of you guys and welcome you to the team.
What does July look like for meetings?
We most likely will have the first meeting in July and perhaps even the second meeting, so we may be.
So we will have one in July, we won't have one this month, another one.
No,
This
because
is
this
the
is the
second meeting
this
of
is
the
the
month.
third Wednesday of the month,
Yeah.
so it's it. So July is the next month after June.
Yeah, July 7th should be
Is
the
it?
next one.
Yeah.
It's July, oh, I thought,
Chris?
They moved it.
I'm gone. July.
I definitely have some on deck for July 7th. And then if not the second meeting in July, probably August, so.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of fun projects coming your way, so.
well, I've already gave my spiel ahead of time, so. Anyone else have anything? With that, we adjourn the meeting and thank staff for everything. Landon, great presentation.
Yeah, Landon.